Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the Arraya Solutions Vodcast. As a reminder, I'm Scott Brion, Arraya Cybersecurity Director. Today, we'll feature a conversation with Jonathan Nguyen-Duy, who is a field CISO from Arraya's partner, Fortinet. If you're not familiar, Fortinet is a network and cloud security company that secures the largest enterprise service provider and government organizations around the world. Welcome, Jonathan. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Scott, it's great to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, so we were talking earlier, preparing for this conversation and discussing some of the latest vulnerabilities that have been revealed, and you had some comments on really how we keep addressing the symptoms, right, and not the problem in security. So just wanted to open it up with that conversation.
Yeah, vulnerability management and the continuing problems around that really highlight a lack of visibility and control. When we look at the stats from FortiGuard Labs and the other reputable researchers in the marketplace, we still find that 99% of the vulnerabilities that were exploited in the last year were known for at least a year. So yeah, we're still being plagued by true 0 days, but the practical reality is that for every new vulnerability we hear about, every new exploit, there are thousands of previously known vulnerabilities. The signatures are available, and yet we don't patch. So I think the larger story is that this year we're going to spend $350 billion in network security, and yet we're still failing on basic things like vulnerability management, configuration management, right? And when you look at the FortiGuard Labs research, we're still seeing that 8 out of 10 attacks that lead to major disruptions and breaches, could have been mitigated through simple to intermediate controls. And so while I think it's important to look at the latest challenges, looking at practical solutions about basic security fundamentals like hygiene and configuration management, having a properly configured firewall and some good compensating controls will take you at least to mitigate the known knowns.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and it's funny as you're saying that, I'm thinking, really the pace of IT and change management has become untenable in a lot of ways, right? Where we're seeing code get put out into the marketplace faster maybe than it should be. Maybe that's just an opinion, but we could maybe be the proof is in the pudding, right? But I think the other effect that's having is putting the pressure on IT shops. A lot of our customers or that enterprise customer, that mid-market customer, where they're struggling to keep skill set and talent on their teams in the security space as well as in the administration and operations space. And so, we're constantly trying to support our customers in prioritizing, where to spend their time and put their skill set energy, whether it's to maintain the edge and maintain all those network security protocols, or is it to follow the new trends and go into cloud adoption and focus back on the applications and get some zero trust foundation. And unfortunately, right, a lot of shops are kind of, their heads are on a swivel and they're trying to figure out where to go strategically while they're really overwhelmed with tactical needs, right, on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where folks like yourselves really come in, right? Because the one thing that everyone's looking for right now is a trusted advisor. The two skill sets that are a huge demand are cloud architect and cloud security architect. Mm-hmm. And it points to the fact, as you said, that most of these shops, that's not their core competency. And so what they're trying to do, and I agree, is that they need to work with service providers and advisors on optimizing helping them understand, first of all, what their current state looks like, right? And then how do you get from your current state to your desired state? And what should that desired state look like? And I think the key element there is the ability to discern the business outcome, the business objectives, translate that into an IT and networking and security strategy that helps you get from the current state to that end state. So many times, you go in and they adopt certain things up front, certain point products or certain parts of cloud or consuming software as a service. You get these subscription services, you get shadow IT, and what you get at the end of the day is a huge sort of disconnected, non-integrated digital infrastructure that has lots of gaps where misconfigurations go undetected, where vulnerabilities go undetected, right? So I think the key, I always tell people, is before you buy anything, really work with someone who understands your business goals and understand where are you today? What does your environment look like today? Where is the data you have? What's the computing you have? What are the workloads, applications? What does your current state look like? And then what is the desired state you're trying to achieve? And then describe that in terms of business goals and then plot out a methodology to get there. That's a much more reasonable course of action, and it helps you avoid a lot of the systemic issues that you and I are talking about today, right?
Yeah, and and one of the things that goes along with that too, I think, is this new shift with businesses are trying to decide, all right, we're back in the office, we're work from home, and what I'm seeing is there seems to be, I don't know, seems to be kind of a hierarchy or a tier being developed, right, between the folks that are working from home and the folks that are going back into the office. And I don't know if you're seeing this, but I think the balance is increasing, where the more senior folks, the more, let's say, privileged and higher seniority folks are being given more leverage, right, or more choice about coming into the office, staying home, right, and I think that creates another interesting problem for us in cyber, because awareness is such a big part of what we do, and education is really, corporate education centers around presence, right, office presence, and being in folks' faces. And I think I'm seeing that increase. Like I was just at a conference over the weekend, or this past week, ShmooCon down in Washington D.C., and there was a lot of conversation around communicating, right? We're growing up in the cyber industry, and we're learning now that we can't just use nerd words and scare people into the proper behavior. We actually have to communicate, like you just talked about, the outcomes, what's the objectives. And so I guess I'm putting that out there as a question, to you. Do you see that as a problem that we're gonna have to solve in 22?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, this notion of hybrid work models and work environments is here to stay. Right? I think depending on whom you look at, the research suggests that some 40% of us are going to have some sort of remote work model moving forward. But what that really points to is this thing of consistency. There's now a demand to have anything as a service, anything as a solution. So with consistent networking, security, and computing, capabilities and performance, irrespective of where you are, whether you're on the road, at home, in the office, irrespective of what device you're on, whether it's a smartphone, a tablet, or your laptop, irrespective of location, device. There's a need right now and an expectation that was born from the pandemic, these millennial expectations that say, every time I interact with a brand, whether it's my company brand or someone I'm doing business with, I want to be wowed. And that requires consistent network performance, consistent security, and consistent computing, so that consistent performance leads to better experiences leads to better outcomes, better business outcomes. And that's why one of the things that's really come across during the last 3 years now is that we really need to stop thinking about IT in silos, because when we think about networking as a silo, security as a silo, and computing and IT as silos, that's not how things work. They need to work as an integral solution, so that you have optimized networking and SD-WAN, optimized security, that's AI, and then you can leverage the scalability and elasticity of cloud to have really good computing experiences and leading to that data-driven decision-making model. So we can't decouple the three elements, right? But yet, when we think about organizations, we've got a CIO, we got a CISO, we have sometimes a bunch of vendor partners that do the computing element, and we've got tools and organizations that are still siloed. But the problems we encounter and have to fix aren't silos. We just talked about it. Is the issue in your performance, is it the applications themselves? Is it a bottleneck on the firewall? Or is it really routing issues? And so the complexities of making that happen are just being realized now.
No, and you make a great point, I think, too, with the consumer growing up, right? And the expectation having changed. I think availability is now key, right? And performance and availability. I mean, the tech giants of our time have made that a reality, and not being able to deliver on that promise really has, it's kind of seen as a marker, right, for how capable you are as an organization, and no matter what your tech can do. Right. The attitude is, if you can't get to it reliably, then it doesn't matter.
But that's where folks like Fortinet and Arraya come in, is that there's so many competing voices in the wilderness. Last night I was at a panel dinner, and there was an quote sassy vendor who said, "Kill your MPLS contracts." MPLS is no longer needed. And then I said, well, there's the routing complexities of first mile, middle mile, last mile, the need to have consistently really great performance. We're not there yet. And so I get worried when there are folks out there selling the equivalent of cyber snake oil that says, hey, ditch everything, just buy this one thing, it'll solve all your problems. It just doesn't quite work that way. But you're right, we're in an evolutionary state. It's an inflection point right now. We see more cloud computing adoption than ever before. We now see more breaches in cloud than actually on-prem. But yet, at the same time, we're still going to market with these traditional approaches that didn't work in the last iteration, right? And now we're thinking about not only hybrid and multi-clouds, but also edge computing as well. So the sheer distribution of computing is so broad right now, and the need to deliver consistent performance and indeed persistence across everything from that LAN, WAN, data center, cloud, and now mech edge as well, right? It's so funny. When I was growing up, the edge was an Irish guitar player, right? And now we talk about the edge, and it's something completely different, right?
Well, yeah, and it's because of that, what we're talking about, I think I'm finding myself advising clients to look into DNS security and DDoS protection in markets that 2 years ago or a year ago, even, I would have suggested that might have been a waste of money, or you really would have had to have an economic case for it. But I like looking at the internet, and especially it's unfortunately a more real analogy today than ever. But it's likened to doing business in a combat zone, right? And if you're going to go open up a store in a war zone, you have to make a lot of risk calculations and decisions, and as the internet has become more of a lifeline, right, for global economic growth. It's also become more of a volatile and aggravated place.
Right. So
attaching to it requires protection.
That's funny. I had a similar sort of thought this morning, and I said, cyberspace is contested space. Cyberspace is a contested operating domain where you have to function, but because of the nature of the adversary and the threat environment, the ability to have automated opportunistic scanning, and the use of AI in every process of the kill chain or the attack chain, whichever one to use, it just says that this environment we operate in isn't the assumption it's a hostile environment, right?
Right.
But the challenge from the last 3 years now is everyone is a digital business. In fact, I would challenge you to say that every business is a digital blank experience company, a digital entertainment experience company, a digital travel experience company, a digital retail experience company. I think because we work in a digital marketplace, the ability to deliver these continually enhanced user experiences are tied directly to the business outcome. And that sets up a huge dilemma for us. I mean, how do we actually get speed, scale, consistency, persistence, and then get it to a point of like 99.97 level of confidence interval, right? And deliver that continuously. That's the expectation.
Yeah.
On one hand, that's the expectation that the operator is being asked to deliver. And then there was a Forbes survey from CISOs that said, look, 63% of the CISOs said that their leadership doesn't believe that the breach is inevitable and that they believe you're going to deliver this level of performance consistently, right? But that at the same time, you operate in a contested domain. Wow.
That's an interesting statistic.
Yeah.
That's really you said 63% of
63%. Doesn't believe that the breach is inevitable, but the CISO and the CSO and the security people all agree the breach is inevitable at some point.
So, they're preparing their resignation letters for when it happens, right?
Well, the other startling statistic in that article was that the average CISO lifespan today is somewhere between 14 and 18 months. And I think it speaks to the level of stress that's in our careers right now. Yeah.
It does, and it does speak when even to that point, right? A couple of years ago, a client interaction delivering bad news about information was a lot different than it is today.
Yeah.
A client interaction today, communicating malicious activity, what was found, what's been done already, and having clear information about the scope and the breadth of it is welcomed with joy.
Right.
Like, oh, you have information, like that's great. Versus like I said 2 years ago, that same exact conversation with information, but the outcome being, a machine was popped or something got encrypted would have been received emotionally in a lot different way.
Yeah, I think today there was some surveys that were done by the World Economic Forum and by these insurance industry, broadly speaking, and everyone recognizes the number one risk that's on the minds of boards today is cyber risk. And so now we understand that this is not a once in a lifetime incident, that this is just part of the risk that we face, whether it's physical risks, now cyber risks, all types of risks, and our ability then to translate that risk into money, right? Monetization of risk helps the board prioritize to understand, like we just said, to help me understand what my current risk exposure is, and then let me figure out what my risk tolerance is. Now I understand what I can tolerate, what my current state is. So let's get to the desired state. And so often we don't do that first. We as technologists tend to buy a product, implement a product. A year or two down the line, we realized we never had enough people to actually staff it correctly. And so time for a refresh. 3 years, we buy something new all over again. I think the irony about those traditional multi-vendor solutions that's coming to light now is twofold. One, we said the reason why we go with multi-vendor best in class is we don't want a single point of failure. We don't want vendor lock-in. And we want to have the best technology for that class. But then three truths we all admit to as well. One, we never have enough people, and therefore we end up with vendor lock-in because, well, my team knows the following vendors, and so that's what they do, which is not a really good business answer to tell the board about why you selected a particular technology. The second one is that you don't have the tools to integrate these products. And the third realization that's very daunting is this. Those decisions that were made 5-6 years ago to buy this brand of this product, this point product, 6 years ago, digital transformation was just on the horizon. It wasn't a de facto standard business model. 6 years ago, we weren't thinking about really distributed work environments. 6 years ago, we weren't thinking about a digital marketplace where the CISO is being asked, tell me the ROI that security delivers on outcomes or user experiences. That all got radically changed and accelerated over the last 3 years. And so what got you there 6 years ago isn't going to get you to a digital infrastructure that allows you as a business to make that sort of transformative growth. And I don't mean 10, 15%, right? But 30,
well, it's 35%. Interesting too. And you say that, and you think, I think it was roughly 6 years ago.
Yeah.
AWS started reporting their earnings.
Yeah.
They weren't even reporting whether they were in the, they were making money or not.
Right.
6 years ago.
So I think for all of us now, we've got to stop and think, okay, the stuff we grew up building didn't really quite work right in that old environment, right? And now we have a much more interconnected environment than ever before, thanks to IT, OT, and this hybrid work model, right? And hybrid cloud. It's faster than ever thanks to 5G, right? And the expectations are higher than ever. The expectations now are across networking, security, and the compute. So there is no practical way that yesterday's approach, which was perfectly valid 6 years ago, is going to get you to where you want to be in this digital infrastructure. So coming out of the pandemic, a lot of the teams and customers I meet with, they're stepping back and they're saying, okay, my business case is going to be funded this year, right?
Right.
How do I get it right? How do I get my computing, my networking, and my security right from the outset so that, I'm to some degree future-proof? So I don't know. Are you having those conversations about how to optimize?
I mean, we are, right, and they're where it's coming to light, because I think the other thing that's happening is the old technologies that we were talking about that we grew up with and built with, the ones that are still around, they're all shifting to the subscription model to fold into the digital transformation marketplace, if you will, as it's going. So what's also shifting is the conversation about spend, right? And where partners like Fortinet are working to make sure your technology, right, has a place in the customer's environment, but also that the customer can comfortably consume it. And especially as we just went through this past year with supply chain and all those fun things, right? There's that element of okay, we want to, not only do we want to be future proof and make sure that we're adopting the right technologies, but we also want to make sure that we're adopting the right licensing models.
Yep.
That, if we have to review the way we capitalize our expenditures because we're not buying hardware anymore, let's review that. And also, for that matter, to be frank, AWS is shaking it up. They are shaking it up with their marketplace, and they're creating a transactional model, right, to for customers to consume all types of technology, not just theirs.
Yeah, and I think that's the race right now is to abstract the complexity of technology acquisition, implementation, consumption. So yeah, you want all of that, and you want flexibility in form factors, because sometimes you need an appliance. You will still need a router no matter what, and sometimes it makes sense to have an appliance. Sometimes it makes sense to have a VM, and sometimes it makes sense to have a cloud delivered capability, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, flexibility in form factor, consumption models, licensing. So how do you do all that and scale, and then reduce your TCO as well as the cost of maintenance, of training, licensing?
So I think that's right. That's the reality. I think that our partners and our customers, our clients are having to kind of adopt and swallow this year, is that you're not. In fact, the prices are going to go up, costs are going to go up, and we're big boys now. Again, like we talked about it earlier in the conversation.
That's
the big boy conversation.
Yeah, well, that's a double-edged sword of consumption-based pricing. Is that with flexible pricing models, it can go up, it can go down. And the one thing about security is you want consistency and predictability of costs as well. Consumption model sounds really sexy until you realize that during an incident, you may consume 6x, 10x more as you're funneling in data, right? So yeah, it's again, having someone who's been there can help you optimize, what's the right balance of fixed contracts and flexible pricing. What should you think about? I think that type of insight is what most of my customers are looking for, right? And it's like,
100%.
So how do I do this? Who's going to help me navigate that? What's the balance, right?
And I think, to throw another sort of question mark on that pile for this coming year, the conflict in Ukraine is 100% going to affect the way cyber insurance underwriters are evaluating risk again this year. And we saw a significant change this year in how they were evaluating risk and the different attestations they were requiring from customers. I'm predicting here, first time, I guess, live, that I think that's going to change significantly. I think we're going to see another 10 times increase in cost and a reduction in coverage. And I think that's going to drive what we're talking about.
And people are just beginning to scratch the surface of the supply chain disruptions that will ripple for the next few years because of this. Because the raw materials that goes into semiconductors, the gases, the vanadium, the minerals, a lot of that actually comes out of the Ukraine and Russia. And so no matter where the actual semiconductors or chips are manufactured, the raw parts, the raw materials that go into them are going to be disrupted. So I think, again, just-in-time inventory really doesn't help a lot when these things happen. And vendors, actually like Fortinet, where we actually have we were stockpiling historically, 6+ months of inventory, we minimize those disruptions, right? So again, having a trusted advisor to say, these are the technologies you need, understand the supply chain, how much do you need to order ahead of time, what's the right balance? Those are the types of insights where I think most of the customers are asking for the value there. But they're thinking about how to optimize that moving forward. And we're going to be in stores, you just suggested, for disruption for probably another 2 to 3 years, I think.
Yeah, and I to kind of carry on to that, I think the need and the increase for obviously new controls, new hardware is going to continue. So again, cost is going to go up.
Well, not just that, but the complexity in the new compliance environment where you have to notify the government within, 24 hours of a data breach. You have to notify if you've made a ransom payment. And the challenge goes from the time that you know about it. Well, if you've got these old ecosystems that are disconnected and non-integrated, how do you know that you've been breached? how do you really know that you've been breached? I mean, the vast majority of breach victims find out about the breach because law enforcement notifies them.
Right.
So, I mean, what is one of the most insightful statistics out there is that despite all this spending, all these best-in-class solutions, which were never integrated, the fact that they don't follow a platform-based approach, they can't even tell when they've been breached. So what's the good of your security solution? Not only can it not mitigate the threat, but it can't even detect the moment that you've been had, right?
Well, and to that point, the skill sets on your team can interpret the data either, right? To make that conclusion. I that's something that came up at this conference, and something sort of touched on a little bit about delivering bad news. I think it's one of the other elements where there's come up in a lot of conversations I've had recently. We're missing a tier of analysts. There's a lot of tier ones, a lot of tier twos. Tier threes are far and few between. And those are the guys that are like, yeah, no, this means you're had, and that we got to call the director or the CEO, right, and have that conversation. I've been on the other end of that conversation. It's not a great call to have. I'm sure you've been part of those as well. But I make the point that leadership in our industry has to get better at, I think, delivering bad news and accepting bad outcomes as a reality, because it's that denial that I think can delay the notification timeline.
So I think there it is. As long as we can monetize the risk and understand it, right, then we can. Well, in a case like that, what I want to be able to deliver is that, hey, boss, we've had an incident, we've had a breach, but we've taken reasonable care to manage that risk. And here's what we've done to manage that risk. We've segmented the network. We brought backup copies up. We have cyber insurance. We have a forensic investigator on scene already. These are things that when you deliver the news, you say that there's a solution. You never want to be the bearer of bad news without a solution. you don't want to walk in and say, we're under a sustained DDoS attack, and we haven't contracted with anyone to help us mitigate that, and we're going to be down for I don't know, and I don't know what the exposure is, right? But if you can say, look, we've had a DDoS attack, but we have a service provider. They were able to redirect the traffic. We're up and running. We're at about a 5% degradation across historic time. That's the type of situation you want to walk into. And in the worst case scenario, you want your leadership team to be able to tell the public, the courts, whomever, that look, we've got this under control. Here are our plans. Here's a mitigation strategy. This is what we've done. And that's how we want to avoid panic, right? Surprises are not a good thing in cybersecurity. And so our entire careers are built upon the ability to maintain persistence and visibility and control, and then to be able to mitigate and manage risks. Our jobs are about managing risk. So yeah, the fact that you've got clients that they say, look, this is our partner, it's under control. That's a good thing.
So I think that's all we have for today. Thank you for joining me, Jonathan. I think it was a really interesting discussion, and I want to thank you and all of our viewers. We appreciate you taking the time to listen. And we hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to take a look at previous podcast episodes, as well as Arraya's expert Q&A series on ArrayaSolutions.com. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jonathan.